Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Naruto video. In this one I'm going to be reviewing the Naruto novel Shikamaru's story Mourning Cloud. So this is the most recently released Naruto novel in English, following up on Naruto's story and Sasuke's story, which I reviewed over the last few days on the channel. So you can check out those videos if you want. But we're here to review Shikamaru's story. So, first of all, what I'll say about it is that I think this one feels very different than Sasuke's story and Naruto's story, because while Sasuke's story and Naruto's story, they do focus, I suppose, on Naruto to a degree. In Naruto's story, he's only really the focus of the first section with Himawari. The rest is more just about the family day. In Sasuke's story, yes, it's about Sasuke, becoming the temporary leader of Team 7. But Boruto, Sarada, Mitsuki get to be in the spotlight in a way just as much as Sasuke. He's not the absolute all-for-nothing focus of the book. Here, though, Shikamaru is the all-or-nothing focus. You can see Shikadai there on the cover. But he's not actually overly involved in this story. The focus characters in this story are Shikamaru, Shikadai, and Tamari to a degree, because we explore, Shikamaru's family life to a certain degree. Naruto's quite heavily involved, of course, because we're dealing quite heavily with politics in this book. So Naruto being the Hokage and him being the Hokage advisor, we deal with them. Then we also are dealing with the other Kage, as well as the daimyo towards the end of the book. Because there's not a lot of action in this book, it's pretty much all politics. And so Shikamaru's tactical planning is pretty much all focused on a political stage, more so than anything. So I can sort of understand why this book perhaps isn't overly suited maybe to doing a full-on adaptation of, because it would be a very dialogue-heavy sequence of events, and it would be episodes that would not feature many of the actual Boruto younger characters all that much, which could be a bit frustrating because the anime tends to really want to focus on the younger characters, of course. Now, I still think the book is super interesting, and if you like Shikamaru as a character, you are going to really like, I think, the exploration that he gets throughout this book. But let's get into talking about the plot a bit here. So where we're set here is that this book basically covers the sequence of events that directly lead up to the Mujika Bandit arc. We sort of go through the Mujika Bandit arc and then a little bit afterwards. And what's really interesting about this is that they add in this extra detail to that whole arc of, the daimyo's son being kidnapped with Shijoji. They add onto that Shikamaru was sort of manipulating events in the background, so that, he was aware that, the daimyo's son is probably going to get kidnapped. We sort of need to allow that to happen, and then we have to be the ones to save him. That way, the daimyo of the Land of Fire will owe us one, and that will help us in our negotiations coming up with the rest of the nations. So that was a kind of quite cool sequence of events to get, but that takes place much more towards the middle of the book. What's actually happening here as we build up to things is that basically right in the middle of a 5 Kage summit, Kuratsuchi just comes straight at Konoha and Naruto to a degree with sort of, accusations of suddenly making a huge deal out of the fact that Konoha is developing the ninja jutsu canister tool, the scientific ninja tools. They've got lots of secret information, and really just suddenly deciding to bring into the spotlight that she's not particularly happy with the fact that Konoha is the most sort of successful village at this point. They're clearly the most powerful, and she wants to make a big deal about that. She feels they need to make some concessions to make the dynamic between the 5 villages much more even. And obviously this surprises Naruto. He's completely taken aback by this, that all of a sudden it's gone from everyone working together to all of a sudden politicking is going on. Why is this happening? And especially when Chojuro ends up speaking up a little bit and kind of agreeing with some of the points that Kuratsuchi is making, you sort of see a rift beginning to develop. Darui and Gara are also kind of very neutral in this, of like, why is this happening? They're not being targeted by anyone, so they don't overly speak up, but it forces Naruto and especially Shikamaru to have to be the ones to sort of diffuse this for now. But this meeting ends up resulting in Kuratsuchi sort of storming out, with the idea being that you have to make a decision by the time we have the next meeting of the Kage. You have to decide to, release all of your secret information and just make that clear to everyone what's going on. And she walks out. And immediately Shikamaru is like, something's going on here. I know Kuratsuchi well enough that that was a little out of character. It might have felt in character that she could be aggressive at times, but there was something up there with the way she was acting. So he sends out Ro and Soku, who are the two Onbu members who were with him during the Land of Silence mission, which is the previous Shikamaru novelization, Shikamaru Hiden, which was adapted in the anime towards the end of Shippuden. So we're familiar with them. He sends them out to investigate the village hidden in the stone, to figure out what's going on. Is there a reason behind why she's suddenly kind of creating a bit of a rift between the Kage here? They come back to him and basically they get the information. Here's what this book is all about from a political point of view. This is the problem that needs to be averted. And it's all explained in one giant chunk of dialogue between Hinoko, who is Soku, and Shikamaru, as they explain this political situation going on here. I have to read this like a couple of times because they only properly explain the full dynamics of it here. The whole rest of the book ultimately is about this. So if you don't get the understanding here, the rest of the book is just going to feel like, whoa, what's going on here? Because the book is just about resolving this issue. So to sum it up, basically, it's that the Land of Flowers is this place of note. They have amazing sort of agriculture going on. They can grow stuff incredibly well. The Land of Earth, and I suppose the village hidden in the stone, has problems because they're in rocky terrain, so they don't have great land to grow food on. So they have natural resources, so they typically have to trade for it. But the daimyo of the Land of Earth really, really wants the Land of Flowers. But the Land of Flowers has a long alliance with the Land of Lightning. So the daimyo of the Land of Earth wants to basically do a violent military takeover of the Land of Flowers, and this is the problem. This is going to cause massive issues between all of the lands as well as the hidden villages. And so it gets complicated to talk about because we're talking about the lands and the villages sort of separately, but also, noting the alliance between them, that, Naruto is the Hokage for a reason. He's the leader of the village hidden in the leaves, but ultimately the daimyo of the Land of Fire is the overall sort of like ruler of that whole nation, and you get into that situation quite a lot. So this is where we get the situation where, like, okay, Kuratsuchi's hand is being forced to a degree in this matter because she kind of has to obey the will of her daimyo, who wants to do this, and she's just going along with it. And her actions at the Kage Summit were basically to create a situation where it wouldn't look as bad for her when this news finally did break out, because she's hurling accusations at Konoha that are kind of concerning, and then if it's eventually revealed that her nation is going to war, that won't be as concerning. But the problem, of course, is that we're in an era of peace, and the idea of a nation wanting to take over another land is a massive problem at this point. This needs to be dealt with. The risk is, of course, that the alliance is going to fall apart here. And so she ends up, working a little bit with Chojuro to get him on her side, so it's not just everyone against her. And that's the situation that we have. So that's the core plot that needs to be dealt with. Along the way, we get the setup that also there seems to be a little bit of an issue happening between Shikamaru and his family, both Tamari and Shikadai. With Tamari, what ends up happening is that he ends up forgetting about his wedding anniversary, and Tamari's quite upset about that. And because, like Naruto, Shikamaru is often very busy with work, he's maybe not as home as much as he should be, that adds to that frustration as well. With Shikadai, it's a little bit of a different situation, but it ultimately comes down to just Shikamaru perhaps not communicating as well as he should be. In this case, he hears from Moegi that Shikadai, as the sort of leader of the trio, turned down an S-rank mission to escort a VIP, just saying that it was a drag. Shikamaru then goes to Tamari to get the explanation for why he did this. And the explanation is that he turned down the mission because the only reason he was given the mission is because those VIPs wanted to get closer to Shikamaru through Shikadai. That Shikadai is becoming more popular with people for missions because, one, he did very well during the tuning exams, but secondly, because his father is Shikamaru, who's very influential in the Leaf Village. So Shikadai kind of refuses, in part because of sort of people just wanting to sort of use him to get to Shikamaru to a degree, and he has to sort of deal with that dynamic as well as just he feels that's the problem. The resolution on the family side of things, it's pretty solid in the end, in that we're kind of skipping ahead from the start to the end of the book, but there's not a ton of development in the middle of this. It's not the most substantial plot, but basically he just ends up in the middle of everything while he's trying to find the political way out of the breaking apart situation. He just talks to Tamari, he talks to Shikadai, and is able to have some important connections with his son, and again with his wife, of just understanding that Shikadai is really skilled. He's really like him, and he talks to him a little bit about his past, that the whole what a drag thing. I used to be like that all the time, probably even worse than you are right now, and I just had to realize that that isn't me at all times, that I found myself more when I was more useful and when I changed a little bit, and just show that you can be the same way. And it's a pretty subtle little moment. It's all about that dialogue that they have, just them communicating, and you get moments where Shikamaru shows a little bit of an interest in Shikadai's video games, and he notes that as I think we've got a little bit of this context in the anime, that Shikadai isn't super into the video games, but he just likes kind of doing stuff with his friends. And so he talks Shikamaru through the fact that, yeah, you play on your own, but you play on your own to get stronger so that you're better for the multiplayer missions, and that's what I actually like to do. And so, Shikamaru just sort of makes a little bit of the point about, oh, so you really like working together with your teammates. That's a major focus for you. And again, you can see the leadership potential in Shikadai, and there's a bit of an understanding between the two of them. And then it kind of ends with Shikadai saying, oh, will you teach me how to play shogi? And, that is something that Shikamaru actually wants. So that works out quite well. With Tamari, it's more of a case of, just her seeing that he's putting some sort of an effort in to be better with Shikadai, and then to some degree make amends for missing the wedding anniversary. That she's not angry solely because he missed it. She gets that he's in a busy, important position. But they bring up sort of the connection between this book and the previous Shikamaru book, the Hiden book, where, she was able to see that he was trying to do everything on his own instead of working as a team with everyone, and just, in a way, basically just showing, let us as your family support you. We believe in you. You can do this. In the same way that I was able to help you in the previous thing, if you want to, talk about work at home a little bit. You seem to think that you're like burdening us if you mention any of it at home. And Shikamaru's like inner dialogue gets that across. And she just kind of points out that it's better if you do talk about that we can help you a little bit, support you through it. And again, just that communication thing, that because he was so focused on what he needs to do and the way he has to do it, he kept his family a little bit out of the loop and was sort of a bit absent from them, and just realizing that he needs to sort of step up in that way. So that was really good. The other thing is that his dynamic with Naruto, I think, is just really good throughout the book. In that you see, obviously, the huge positives of them working together. The whole idea of Naruto being the sun, the shining light as the leader of the Leaf Village. And then Shikamaru is the shadow advisor in the background who will do more of the stuff that Naruto won't do. That he'll do it for Naruto so Naruto can remain the shining light that he is. So Naruto can always be the idealistic character that he is. That you can never accuse him of being the one who did the drastic deeds that needed to be done. Other people did it sort of on his behalf to save him from having to do it. And it leads to this actually really interesting situation where Sasuke comes back to the village and just talks to Shikamaru. And it's so interesting because in so many ways, it's one of the only Shikamaru and Sasuke scenes we've like ever had. And they note that in the dialogue that, you know, Shikamaru has like never had that much of a close relationship to Sasuke. But they have this conversation about the situation at play here. And Sasuke just notes that like, basically like he respects a lot of the work that Shikamaru is doing to engineer this situation where Konoha and the rest of the world can be at peace, and that if it works, it's going to save everything. And that, Sasuke kind of thanks Shikamaru for, doing the work that Naruto can't do. And the two bond together a little bit over the fact that that is the role both of them share. Sasuke does much the same work for Naruto as well, where he does the I'm out on my own, away from the village, doing spy research work on these really complicated topics that are essential to village security that Naruto can't quite be involved in. And again, Sasuke, like Shikamaru, is willing to go to the kind of, potentially darker, murkier places that Naruto will never go to. And they just sort of have a connection with each other, and they just kind of like, smile at each other because they both ultimately agree with the approach that they each have about this. And I think that, again, works really, really nicely. As for the actual plot and how they end up doing it, it is a lot of meeting. Then Shikamaru has some family scenes. The next big meeting between everyone. Family scene, big meeting. That's very much the structure of the book, is going back and forth between the sort of family plot and the political plot. The political plot, ultimately, the way they kind of go about solving it is that one key scene is that Shikamaru, during one of the meetings, when things look like they're really about to rip apart, because Naruto announces to everyone that, like, look, we figured out what's happening here. Kuretsuchi, we know your land is planning to invade the Land of Flowers. What's the situation there? And she, to, like, of course, just defend her nation, doubles down the pressure on Konoha, and it really feels like the alliance is about to fracture at this moment. And Shikamaru takes a pretty risky move at this point, which is that he does full sort of shadow possession jutsu on all of the Kage. All 5 of them he has in the shadow possession jutsu. And he's basically making the threat here that, like, I could end the threat of all of this happening here if I, killed the threats here. If I killed Shojiro and Kuretsuchi, is basically what he's saying. This would allow us to, change the dynamic of what's going on here. But in the back of his head, he's thinking that, come on, Naruto, do what I expect you to do here in response to this situation, and show the power of Konoha here, which will diffuse the situation in a slightly different way. by super acknowledging that Konoha is the most powerful of the villages, we can hinder the damages sort of done by the other nations. And so Naruto, realistically, they get across, is the only one powerful enough to just immediately break out of shadow possession. So they don't fully explain exactly what he does, but it's implied. He activates one of his energy forms, snaps out of it, and then he does punch Shikamaru and is like immediately apologetic to the other Kage and like, I will deal with him later. But it is an impressive show of power from Naruto that he was able to avert this kind of seemingly disastrous situation. So there's that in all of this. They eventually settle on the idea that they're going to have to get all the daimyo involved, because it's the daimyo's decision that was ultimately the cause of this. So they're going to need to use their daimyo, the fire daimyo, to their advantage. And of course, this is Tento's father from the Mujina Bandits arc. So this is where we get the scene where it's revealed Shikamaru actually engineered some of the situations surrounding what happened during that arc, which is that he had a feeling that the Mujina Bandits were going to target Tento. So he sort of let it happen, but in the background had full control of the situation to make sure that it was the Leaf Village shinobi who were the ones who got Tento back. That way, the Land of Fire Daimyo would owe the Leaf Village something. And it's true, that's what happens. It's revealed that he had Mirai and her squad ready to go to save Tento if needed, but Boruto and his team were able to do it before that. So it was made even easier for him, especially because Boruto ended up capturing Shojoji as well. So that worked out well for Shikamaru. So we get that situation, and then we get just a lot of scenes with the daimyo, where they have to convince the feudal lords to have a meeting, discuss what's going to happen, and after a few back and forths, we end up having this meeting where they're like, okay, a meeting of just the five daimyo is not going to fix this, because similar to the meeting between the Kage, it just coming down to five people where it's clearly just the two people on opposite sides and then a couple of neutrals. It's never properly going to work. So Shikamaru comes up with the great idea eventually that we need to have more of a kind of continental summit. Let's bring everyone in. We'll bring the Kage in, the daimyos in, and the rulers of all of these sort of nations involved in everything. We'll bring them all in. Because one idea that the daimyo of the Land of Fire has is that one way to potentially avoid this situation is that to stop the war, what if the Land of Fire just gave some of its territory to the Land of Earth? Again, good territory that has good land on it where they could grow crops, and it is a piece of territory where the people already feel culturally closer to the Land of Earth than they do to the Land of Fire. And it's something he's already been potentially thinking about. So this is a kind of peaceful way to do this, where the most powerful of the lands actually willingly gives up this piece of territory, which solves all of the problems. Now, there's obviously some suspicious on their side, because the most powerful nation willingly giving something up like this. What's the catch? Not realizing, of course, that, Naruto, Land of Fire, they have just this very idealistic approach. This is how we've got to this point. This is how we've made so much progress. There's no need to be so tentative about it, but they really get across that the daimyo of the Land of Earth is this truly kind of greedy man who isn't that intelligent about these type of things. That he has such power, but he really isn't analyzing the situation properly. So we end up having the Continental Summit, and in the end, all of Shikamaru's kind of plans have been put into place. He's devoted everything to making sure that this happens, including a very interesting scene where both Naruto and Shikamaru basically bow down before the Land of Fire daimyo and are just please, we need you to put your all, everything into this. As a favor for getting your son back, for everything, please do everything that you can to get this deal done. And the result of this is that they get him fully on side. Not just that he agrees with them, but he says to them, okay, yeah, I will fight with you. So he's fully passionate about this as well, which is why he comes up with a deal very in line with something Naruto would say. So yeah, we get to the big meeting where, like, okay, the daimyo of the land of Earth makes his speech about how, shinobi want to fight. We feel it is a better course of action that we do what we've always done and fight to claim this piece of land for ourselves, and that's just the way it has to be. Just very simplistic kind of point of view. The Land of Fire daimyo gets up and explains that no, I don't quite agree with that. I don't agree that shinobi only exist to fight. That there is this sense of, like, they fight, but they fight to achieve something. And currently, we're in an era where we've achieved something. And we'll fight to make sure that that happens. We don't need to needlessly fight and claim land and stuff like that. We can do more than that. So that is why he's offered up this land to, hand over to them. It's kind of all in agreement. It should be. And then he transitions into, and the person who made this happen was Naruto. So Naruto gets a big speech. And very interestingly within the book, what they do is that Shikamaru at this point leaves the meeting. He feels like, okay, I'm done. It's done. We've won. I don't even need to listen to what Naruto says because I know he's got this. He will give a speech that will get everyone behind him. This speech, just the fact that Naruto has been allowed up on stage as like the third person to speak, it's won us this thing. Full confidence, he just walks outside, has a smoke, thinks about his family, everything that he's done, and yeah, it turns out that it all works out, and it turns out that the agreement is there. The land that is being transferred over from the Land of Fire to the Land of Earth is relatively happy about it again because they feel culturally closer. It's a peaceful way to end the solution, and the situation. Kuratsuchi even walks out and kind of is thankful to Naruto and Shikamaru for putting their all into this, and that, just revealing that she did what she had to do because, again, she more or less had to agree with what her daimyo was saying and their understanding of that. The leader of the Land of Flowers actually comes out, and they make a kind of interesting point about, you didn't speak during that whole thing, even though the whole meeting was basically about, should the Land of Earth be allowed to invade you or not? Why didn't you speak? And the ruler is revealed to be relatively young, and he just says that, look, we're a small, weak nation. We would have looked even weaker if we got up there on stage and campaigned to stronger nations for, like, please save us, basically. So he chose that the best way to portray any sense of strength for this land was to actually just not speak in it. And it's an interesting sort of just point for Shikamaru to accept that that's what they did, but it is logical for the situation that they were in that they did that. And he is just so thankful to Naruto and and Shikamaru for being able to get done what they did. And the book just ends with Shikadai actually accepts one of these VIP missions and goes off on it, and Shikamaru is thankful that he's doing this, and the book ends with just a nice Tamari and Shikamaru scene where they reflect on sort of their first date, the whole what a drag thing of, like, she's taken to saying it because as a sort of a bit of a joke that, like, he always was like that in the past and is still kind of like that, so she teases him quite heavily about that. And it's just to note that he'll always do whatever he can to protect his nation and also his family. So it's pretty nicely put together. It's a tough one to review because it does get very sort of into the weeds on politics between, like, multiple nations, and it's about the daimyo, and it's about the kage, and so on. And then it's kind of continuity heavy as well, in that a lot of the sort of Shikamaru Tamari dynamic is based in the other Shikamaru book and so on, but it's pretty good. I definitely recommend reading it. That, you know, this one's already adapted in the anime pretty accurately, but there's one whole chapter that isn't adapted. This one seems perfect to do in the anime at some point. It just seems like a really, really fun story. This one is definitely has the most depth to it because it goes really heavy in on politics and is really focused on all the adult characters and not much on else. So, that's one unique aspect to this book. But yeah, there's my review of it. Again, I hope they do release a lot of the other Naruto novels in English. But that has been the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on Shikamaru's story if you've read it. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.